Welcome back in our continuing series, Race for City Hall. Tonight, we hear from Republican frontrunner Joe Lhota, former MTA chief. He's polling pretty well, leading the Republican field by more than 10 points. But he's trounced in each head-to-head matchup with whatever Democratic nominee emerges. And Dominic Carter sat down with Mr. Lhota today. Dominic, what did you think?
Well, I was pretty impressed, to be honest with you. I was curious as to whether or not Mr. Lhota has the personality to be mayor.
Yep.
And I came away from the interview believing that he can fill the top job. Now, you may not believe this, and our great professor here, but a Democrat has not held the mayor's seat in New York City in 20 years. In 20 years. Now, if Joe Lhota gets his way, Republican control of the Big Apple will stay exactly that way. One of the Republicans you're running against in the primary, John Catsimatidis, he says of Joe Lhota when we spoke to him, you're a nice guy, doesn't dispute your reputation, deputy mayor, MTA, but he says you really ought to run for controller, not for mayor.
Well, first off, I'm a great guy, not just a nice guy. And John knows that. But the reality is I've got more background and more experience to be the mayor of New York than anyone running for race in the race, whether it's John or any of the Democrats running, because I've got experience both in the public sector and the private sector managing complex organizations, and I can hold, will actually say my experience is better than anyone else's. The controller is an auditor. I'm not an auditor. I'm a leader, I'm a manager, I'm a visionary, and I want to take this city and continue all the great progress that's been made over the last 20 years and continue it into the next 4 and probably 8 years.
You holding a fundraiser coming up, I believe, in the days ahead, at a place where you're going to smoke a cigar, is that a way of saying in your face to Mayor Bloomberg?
Oh, no. I had that fundraiser last week. It was in Queens. And there were some friends of mine who thought it was a good idea to meet different people, and I was up in Bayside, Queens. Met the commissioner of Bayside Little League baseball while I was there. And it was really important. Look, I've smoked cigars. I smoke them occasionally. I'm not a habitual smoker, but we did it in a place where it was legal and it was allowed. And I said to the New York Times, who was actually at the fundraiser, I said the thing that's the most important about smoking a cigar is the friendship and the camaraderie that you get and the conversation that you get with people. And there were men at the bar, there were men at this fundraiser as well as women at the fundraiser, and everybody was having a cigar.
Does Mayor Giuliani, does he help your campaign or hurt it?
Mayor Giuliani helps my campaign. I am an integral part of the Giuliani administration. I was his budget director, I was his deputy mayor, and I'm known to people all throughout the city as somebody who went into every community. I talked to everybody in every community, and I will continue to do that. Look, if you think about what happened in New York City in the 8 years that Rudy Giuliani was the mayor, crime dropped precipitously. Murder dropped precipitously in all parts of the city. And most importantly, in the inner city, in the parts where the crime was the highest, it dropped even further there. I mean, Rudy Giuliani came in with a vision to make the city a safer place, a vision to make the city a place where people could go about their lives and without fear. And look at where people are living in the city now. Parts of the city that we never thought people would be living in before. Housing developments are going up, low and moderate income housing, affordable housing is going up everywhere, all throughout the city of New York, because Rudy Giuliani had this idea that New York is a place that can be safe again. And I think there's an enormous amount of credit.
But under Mayor Giuliani, there was also Amadou Diallo. Under Mayor Giuliani, there was also a bad relationship with the city's minority community.
Dominic, the actions that happened during the Giuliani administration, the Amadou Diallo thing and the relations that you said with the African American community, there were no riots during that period of time. There weren't any, Korean incidents like there were during the Dinkins administration. You got to understand that during Rudy Giuliani's administration, more African American men are alive today because he reduced murder by almost 60%. He deserves to get the credit for that. Rudy Giuliani had a laser-like vision on doing one thing in this city, and that is making it safe where people can live, work, have fun, raise their family, and he deserves an enormous amount of credit for it.
But Joe Lhota, the Democrats are going to tag you as, hey, that's Rudy's guy. That's his chief qualification. That's, you know, the MTA, fine, great job at the MTA, but that's Rudy's guy. How are you going to counter that?
Go for it.
That's your message to them?
No, I will counter it. I'll counter it with the facts instead of the hyperbole that they want to throw out and things that are not true. I will counter it with the facts, as I always have done, and basically talk about how great the city is because of the things he's done. Everybody's different. Everybody's different. You know, newspapers, when I started to get into the race, asked me the question, am I going to be this, you know, Rudy 2 or Rudy Redu or Redux or however you pronounce that term. The reality is we're all different. We're all different. We all have our own specialties. I am very proud of my time in the Giuliani administration. I'm very proud of what the Giuliani administration did to allow this city to flourish the way it has flourished, and to give me and my family the opportunity to live here, work here, and thrive here.
Let's talk about Stop and Frisk for a moment. You're a strong supporter of Stop and Frisk. But most people under the program have been found to have done nothing wrong.
Right.
What do you say, Mr. Lhota, to people that look like me? What do you say to them?
First off, it's called Stop, Question, and Frisk. That's what the New York State Penal Code calls it. That's what the Supreme Court called it in 1988. And all of our police officers, well, police officers throughout the country actually are trained in their respective academies. Here in the first week of the NYPD Police Academy, they begin the process of training for Stop, Question, and Frisk. And the fact of the matter is, there's data out there. Ray Kelly has put it out there saying that the people who are stopped are representative of the victims of crime and how they describe their assailants. People who, you know, shouldn't be stopped unless there's a predicate reason to be stopped. Now, I'm also the first one to tell you, training is critical for Stop, Question, and Frisk. If you put an officer in a neighborhood where they're not trained for the culture of that neighborhood, you know, as I go into Queens, and it doesn't matter, you can go 3 and 4 blocks and you go to different communities, different cultures, Central American, South American, Caribbean, Asian, the various different Asian communities, all in one borough. It's extraordinary. You need to understand the culture. We need to continue to train our cops to understand the cultures of the people they're there to serve, and to be sensitive to the people they're there to serve. That's the most important part of it. It's to really to understand who they're serving. Stop, Question, and Frisk is a tactic, a police tactic that's been around for quite a long period of time. It's one that needs to continue, but one that needs to be used judiciously.
Discussing Anthony Weiner now. Donald Trump says that Mr. Weiner is a perv. Should Trump apologize?
Donald is a friend of mine. Anthony is a friend of mine. I don't want to get in the middle of that.
You're going to pass on that
I'm
one?
going to pass on that. I think Anthony is intelligent. I think Anthony is undisciplined. But he's got an enormous amount of energy. I mean, in a short period of time, he's been toying with the idea of running for mayor. He's altering the race slightly, and that goes to the power of his intelligence. But he is, you know, obviously undisciplined when it comes to certain parts of his life.
Could he be elected mayor?
You know, I'm one of the people religiously who believe people should be forgiven for what they do. I'm not sure the people yet are ready to forgive, but he's on the path towards it. But I don't think he has the ability to be elected this year.
Now, Mr. Lhota is part of the city's campaign finance program, Richard. The reason why that's important is it guarantees, as part of the program, there will be debates. If he wins the primary, there will be debates this fall in the general election.
Couple quick things from me. I think he's got more personality than people give him credit for, but he sure loves Rudy Giuliani. And how much do you think the city, either publicly, polling, or even privately, wants to return to the Rudy days? Because that's what he's saying. You elect me, you're going to get more of the Rudy years.
That's an excellent question, and we'll only know the answer on Election Day. That's going to be his biggest challenge. How is he different than Rudy Giuliani? Let's face it, when you're mayor, you're running the city, but you're really not running the city. Lhota is the guy that ran the city for Rudy Giuliani. The mayor makes the calls and so on, but that's the guy that made it happen, good and bad. The Democrats are gonna throw everything negative under Giuliani at Lhota, starting with the Amadou Diallo case.
And to that end, that line, we saw that famous headline of a page where he said, "You're alive." This was back in the Rudy years when he said, when pressed on that issue, basically saying, what are you complaining about?
Talking about black men,
yeah,
yes.
He kind of doubled down on that a little bit.
He did double down on it, saying that, listen, let's start with the fact that you're alive, men of color. So, I mean, it's going to be very interesting. But believe it or not, whether you like him or not, the guy you just saw, that could very well be the very next mayor of New York City.
Now, I asked you, Jeannie, that 20 years we've had Republican mayors when you have a registration that is so heavily skewed Democrat. Can we really take a pattern from that, or is Bloomberg such an anomaly, and that the Rudy thing was because of, Dinkins being so unpopular? Or is there something to it that while they say we're going to have a Democratic city council, we're going to have a Democratic city in issues, maybe we want a tough on crime kind of mayor from the right side? Do we read anything?
It is so astounding when you think about the numbers that work against a Republican winning in the city, and yet, as Dominic mentioned, 20 years we've had a Republican mayor, an independent mayor. I think there is something to it. I think people do like to split their vote. They don't want to go too far one way or the other. So you mentioned the Democratic City Council. I think people do feel, okay, we have a Democratic City Council. We don't want to also have a Democratic mayor. Many people feel that way, that they would rather have more of a balance. So if Lhota can make the case that he's going to balance out a very liberal, very left-wing city council, he may have more of a case to be made than you'd see looking at the numbers.
Well, we know this much. If he's not the nominee and Mr. Weiner represents the Democrats, he's probably not getting his vote here. I heard undisciplined about 10 times there. All right, tune in tomorrow night. We got part 2 of Dominic's conversation with Mr. Lhota, and up next, it marks the 6-month anniversary since Sandy slammed into our region. When we come back, we're going to take you up to date here on where we as a region stand on recovery efforts. Please stay with us.